All right, I'm calling this meeting to go order at 6:01. Approval of the minutes. Everybody read the minutes?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Seconded.
All those in favor of approval of the minutes as,
Aye.
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 I wasn't here. Oh, Jim's here. Should we wait?
Nah.
No?
Just Jim.
He's trying to,
Good.
Sort of here.
I wasn't here, so I guess I
trying to be
abstained.
the 200th caller.
Oh, he's trying to be the 200 caller, okay. And what does he win, a fishing trip, too?
Yeah. He's trying to get a proper hat. He's got that beaver one. He's trying to get a duck one, I think.
Yeah, I see Oregon's going to
Well,
the,
they're gonna have to do a little bit.
Oregon State, yeah, they're going to the World Series. That's
Yep.
awesome.
all right. Appearance of interested citizens. I'm not gonna wait for Jim. Clay Rustin, please.
The reason that I'm here is we'd like to bring the fastest growing sport in America a little bit closer to us. The fastest growing sport in America is going to be one that most have rarely heard of. If you've heard of it, definitely in the minority. It's called pickleball.
Oh, yeah. Heard of it.
We have a tennis court striped for pickleball.
Which one is it?
Well,
Willamette Manor.
Manor? Yeah. They've also done, there's a few in town, a lot of places, cities are converting unused tennis courts. You can get 4 pickleball courts out of one good size unused tennis.
Thank you, Alan.
And instead of having 4 people show up maybe to play tennis,
Bye now.
we get 20 to 40 to show up to play pickleball on a regular basis, 3 days a week.
I actually read up on pickleball.
All right. So one of the things that most people are unaware of is pickleball is played with a wiffle ball. It's a workout. I'm a former tennis player at a pretty high level, and this gets you a workout like tennis can't do. Okay, so anyway, I got a real quick video. It's 2 minutes. Little introduction to pickleball. If we can get this to play.
Okay. Heard of it, never seen.
the volume
yeah.
is off down right.
What's that?
The volume button down right by
Thank
the
you.
time is off.
Oh, here we go.
No,
On the
on the
computer.
computer.
Bottom right.
On the bottom right of the
Where your
screen.
time is and your date.
Oh, okay, yeah, there
Sound
we go.
indicator's
There we go.
off.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
It's NBC, it has to be fake news.
Oh,
Activity
Fake news,
from
fake news.
NBC's Mark Potter. If the pickleball craze has not yet hit your town, stand by. It's on its way. Pickleball is one of the fastest growing sports in America and can be played by just about anyone, including 91-year-old Lee Kritzer, vying for a medal at a pickleball tournament in Delray Beach, Florida.
It gives you exercise. It's fun, social, and it's competitive.
Although it's exploded recently, pickleball was invented almost 50 years ago near Seattle, a combination of tennis, badminton, and ping pong. It's played with a paddle and a wiffle ball on a short court, which attracts older players who can still win without having to run too far.
You can compete with the younger people by using your
Ron
head
and I got a dog.
while they try to
We
use
go,
their speed. You outthink them.
You know, watching this game being played, you might wonder why it's called pickleball. Well, over the years, it's been widely reported that it was named after the inventor's dog, Pickles. But the inventor's wife said the name actually came from the sport of rowing, where a pickle boat has a mixed crew, just like pickleball is a mix of other sports. The American pickleball capital may well be the Villages, a huge retirement community near Orlando. Even with 140 pickleball courts, players form lines each morning to get a game. Looking good. These women are passionate but friendly competitors.
Every Wednesday, we start off with golf in the morning. Then we go to lunch, and then we play pickleball.
That's our triathlon.
That's our triathlon.
The USA Pickleball Association says the game is spreading around the world and easily has more than 150,000 players. A fun, fast-moving sport with a funny name. Mark Potter, NBC News, Orlando.
So that was 4 years ago. when they're talking about 300,000 people, I think they said, there are upwards of 3.5 million.
Is there money involved here?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Now, asking or giving?
Yeah, both.
Because we can raise money pretty well.
No, I'm talking wagers.
Wages.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, I'm in golf, you know, that's thing, pickleball, not so much. There are tournaments that go that route. So what we're proposing is, being a former tennis player, I know that tennis courts around here don't get used. The outdoor ones are very light use. And it's kind of sad because we have a crew that passionate about pickleball. Average age across the board is 40 to 60, 65. I
Kids.
played a week ago with a guy that was 69, really good.
Kid.
Just kids.
And
I just,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said, Jim.
I said that's just a kid still.
Yeah, it's the kids, right,
Yeah.
the youngsters. So what we're trying to do here is just introduce it to the Parks Board so that when the opportunity presents itself, that it would be something that you're familiar with, that you know you have people that are willing to do what it takes to get the court either rehabbed into pickleball, because we can put 4 pickleball courts on 1 unused tennis court. And instead of having 4 people show up, maybe to play tennis, you know, some guy didn't show up because he got hurt or whatever, we have 20 to 40 people show up. Sunday mornings, what are the other things we got? Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. Typically Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. And right now we're having to drive to either down to Highlands where they've got a couple courts that are not dedicated. And dedicated courts are strictly pickleball courts. The other option is they restripe tennis courts so that pickleball can be played on a tennis court. And it's not nearly as nice. You're not going to host a tournament there if you decided to host a tournament. Bend had, get my numbers right, Bend had 90 players that were, they considered them as part of their core group, 90 players prior to building their 14 courts. After they built their 14 courts, the numbers went above 400.
Wow.
So it attracts a group that is a desirable group, typically retired, and with time and money. So it allows us to, say, match funds if we could get access to a court where we can convert it, and we can get grant funds. Cost the city very little money. We're actually not even seeking money. What we're seeking is access to those unused courts. Questions?
Well, thank you. First of all, most of us, I don't want to speak for everybody, but we always wonder, what is pickleball?
Yeah, it's a
You know,
weird sport.
and we've talked about it. Robert, we've talked about certain courts that could be used for pickleball. We didn't know what it was. I mean, the name isn't too self-explanatory, so.
I've only been playing for a year and a half, and because of my tennis background, you pick it up really quick. If you've played any paddle racket sport, ping pong, badminton, racquetball, tennis,
Handball.
handball, you pick pickleball up so fast. And that's why it's so intriguing to everybody. They just want, well, let me see how it is. The guy, the news reporter, he could play it. He probably never hit a ball like that in his life. 10 minutes, he's ready to go. In fact, the hardest thing is scoring. Figure out how to keep score, which is weird. It shouldn't be.
Is it scored like handball?
Well, it's not rally scoring every time you win a point. It's like the old volleyball where you only win a point on your serve.
Right.
And
Well, okay, it'd be, well, no, table tennis isn't
And
that
then
way.
there's a couple other weird nuances, but we don't, that doesn't.
Yes, Mr. Laura.
So Clay, great presentation. I know that pickleball is something that's coming up, and why do you assume? I have a couple questions. So first is, do you assume people aren't using the tennis courts right now because of the lack of maintenance and just the general condition of the court, or what do you think is the downward trend
Yeah.
specifically on that?
Oh, without a doubt, that plays into it. I mean, because a nicer court is going to attract better players. It's also going to attract skateboarders,
Right.
unfortunately.
Right.
But yes, definitely the condition will add to the playability, obviously. But tennis players can be kind of snooty, being one, and it's one of those things where it's, they want to go to the outdoor courts at Salem Swim and Tennis. They want to go to Courthouse over by the fairgrounds. They want to go to, they got a tournament in Seattle they're off to. Tennis courts, outdoor courts, for whatever reason, municipal courts, unless they're really well kept and there's multiple courts, so your buddies can go play and then do a little round robin thing, they just don't get used. And that's everywhere I've lived. I lived in Hawaii, California, Seattle, Salt Lake City. I mean, I can tell you, they just don't get used. And I've been playing tennis for 40 years.
So my next question is kind of along with that. So as we've done the parks prioritization, a few of these courts have been brought into question, and I think that the position for a lot of folks has been to try to encourage multi-use courts, but it sounds like that may create an economic buffer or deterrent, as it were, from bringing in tournaments, which will lead to my next question. So is there presently a league that you belong to now that's looking to try to get into Keizer?
So there are, so the USAPA, which is the United States Pickleball Association.
Right.
Yes, there are designated leagues or sanctioned areas. Keizer does not have one. So
Okay.
that will definitely be coming. Salem has one.
Right.
As far as tournaments go, if you don't have dedicated courts, because I don't know that you're going to get a decent tournament. You'll get a tournament if you want. We played one at Highlands. It wasn't very well attended. It was a fundraiser that we had put on for the Boys and Girls Club, just to raise money for them. And I think it wasn't a lot. They got a couple $1,000 for them over a weekend.
Well, this has been brought up. It was brought up, I think, multiple times through the parks outreach, and we heard from folks actually quite passionately on the pickleball thing specifically that they wanted to see this become a more accessible sport. Again, sort of in the realm of what we're doing in the sort of repair and restoration process right now is to try to create those multi-use courts, but maybe there's certainly an opportunity to designate one or two. I don't know. That's
Clay,
going to
can
be.
I
Yeah, dude.
So, to show you what's happened, McMinnville, these are conversions from tennis courts.
Sir,
He needs to come
come on up,
forward
please.
for the
Come
mic.
forward.
McMinnville just converted 8 tennis court to 4 pickleball courts, and then they restriped another court and left it tennis pickleball. Albany converted a tennis court to 4. Springfield just converted some tennis courts to 8 courts. Dallas just got 4 brand new courts from ground up. So it's something that's really spreading it seems like the small communities are doing it more than the larger communities. But a lot of people, I know everybody's kind of afraid to give up that tennis court. And we've run into that in Salem. It's like, no, it's got to stay tennis. But as Clay has said, there's not that many tennis players anymore. If they are, they go to Bush Park on a really nice court or something. So
Even a mixed opportunity, if there's a court, maybe we convert one into 4,
Right.
but you leave the others as multi-use, We're just asking to have an opportunity to have, one, that's a pickleball destination.
Yes, Mr.
So I have a quick follow-up. You mentioned access. What does access mean to you? Are you wanting to start converting one? Are you bringing something for that? Are you bringing the funds for that? Because that's a different conversation.
Totally.
So if you have a plan to bring to us to say, hey, we found an area, we want to do this, and that's a whole different conversation
Oh,
than
yeah.
just bringing this
Yeah.
in.
My first opportunity to even just toss it out. I didn't know where everybody was at. If it was just gonna be, sorry, we're not interested, or like this. This has been very positive from my perspective. What our goal would be if we could have it, are your wishes granted, would obviously be, let's just go build, what Bend has, and let's have 14, designated courts. That's not gonna happen. I'd like to see, one tennis court converted into 4 designated pickleball courts. Just one, get rid of one tennis court. They can go other places. One court, maybe have one next to it that remains tennis, and the other court becomes pickleball. That happens. You just put a fence divider in between like they have in
Yes,
tennis.
Robert.
So the 2 tennis courts we have currently are in neighborhood parks with very limited parking. One actually has no parking, the other you can park about 5 vehicles in.
That would be an issue.
How does that affect that?
We've had that situation before in various places that we've played. It becomes a little bit of a deterrent, but we're talking people that are active. You gotta walk half a block, so what? I mean, if you can't walk, you're probably gonna be playing pickleball. So, the first time they're gonna need, we'll have to put some instruction out, but I don't think it's a great hindrance.
Yes, Mr.
You
Lawrence?
need to go, Dylan?
Sure, yeah. I could be wrong. I seem to recall we had some discussion about the upcoming sports courts in Keizer Rapids were planned to be pickleball. Is that right?
That would be,
That was a multi-use court, but yes, we can definitely steer it more in that direction, and that would probably be the most appropriate location for it. The other thing that was mentioned to me is the noise of this sport and how that may or may not work in some of our neighborhood parks. So maybe you could expand on that a little bit for us.
When the paddle hits the ball, you are going to hear a pop.
hear a smack.
And I looked at those two parks yesterday, and I don't remember how close the houses were to them. I know you had to walk back into them. Are there houses close?
Yeah, very close.
There are.
Yeah.
But here's the thing with this. So we play over at Highlands, and there are houses surrounding it. Now, the earliest that they play, 9?
9 on Sunday,
9 on Sunday, 9 o'clock, 9 a.m., and
6 o'clock in the evening to about 8.
we're
9.
not out there at 11 o'clock at night playing pickleball.
You'd be in the dark.
And those old folks, their mouth, boy, the language out there. No, I'm just
Yeah.
Cutting, picking kids.
golf is a lot worse.
So can I say something about the courts that you did strike? I looked at those yesterday, and as you kind of mentioned, the problem with that is people would have to bring their own net.
Yeah.
And the casual player is not going to have a net probably to go put there. So that's one of the problems with striping a court like that. What are they going to use to play with, So it's kind of the advantage of having the net there all the time.
And the way we address that, which is an option, if you don't like it because they get abused, is you have a portable net in a lockbox, but the lockboxes get stolen and vandalized.
Yeah, we had that conversation and kind of chose to go the route of you bring your own net because of that exact issue and go get vandalized or stolen or.
Like a tennis net, just made it permanent.
Right.
So Clay, I've known you for over 20 years, and so this feels weird to say this, but one of the things that came out was opportunities for seniors, and I'm not going to put you in that category because, but I think this is really this is encouraging to me because this was a very so when you go back and look at the statistics from the park survey, the largest majority of commenters were 55 and older, and so. To have this opportunity presented as a way to move forward in a very positive way to encourage the more mature folks in our city to become more active, I think is really, it's awesome. And I'm very intrigued to see what you're going to be able to bring forward with this particular topic. We heard a lot of, well, I'm 63 years old, I don't go to the parks. Maybe this is going to be that sort of catalyst to get some of those folks in the parks, old tennis players or whatever. So I think it's great. Thanks for coming out and spending the time doing that. And I look forward to hearing new stuff on it. That's all I got for now.
What would you like, what is required, what would you like for us to bring next month to the table for you? Is there anything specific?
Well, a check for 200,000, a plot of land, and no. I honestly don't know. I mean, that would be a conversation more for staff looking at the Parks Master Plan, seeing where if you're going to go new or you're going to look at rehabbing, really kind of looking at what's available and what needs to come. I think that from my own perspective as it related to the survey and this fee going into effect, right? I personally said my interest is in the operations and maintenance, kind of getting back to a status quo. But if a good organization came in and said, hey, we want to do this, give us the opportunity, I would fully support that. And I think this is one of those cases where personally, I think if you guys have a really good plan and staff has vetted it and looked at it and it's functional, I think it's a fantastic thing. Anything we can do to encourage our 55 and older crowd or anybody that wants to go and learn pickleball, is a great thing on my own personal note. So I mean, we could speak to the rest of the board and ask what they expect from it, but, you know, that would just be my,
And we certainly didn't mean to take this much of your time, so.
Mr. Jim, you had a question?
You did mention multi-use courts. Since we only have 2 courts right now, what I envision is doing the striping for both pickleball, and then, of course, you have the tennis, and let's see what we get. And then, you know, when we have the opportunity to do something at Keizer Rapids, we'd at least have an idea how many people were interested in doing it. Now, I know you said that those aren't going to be as popular as a strictly pickleball court.
An option.
Yeah, but we had talked about doing it multi-purpose, and that does work.
Yeah, it can. Depending on your ability to see lines, a lot of this tennis is peripheral vision, and if you're standing and, you know, there's a line you can't cross with your feet in pickleball and hit the ball on the fly. If you're standing on that line, so there's a bunch of lines there, and they're the same color, it can get confusing when things are happening real fast, and this ball goes pretty quick at times.
Well, then you get a McEnroe effect and somebody
So,
starts arguing.
there you
Yeah,
go.
there you go. I like it. I like it.
So,
You know,
so that
controversy.
could be an issue is where the lines are and where your lines are.
Well, they could actually be a different color.
That's true. That is definitely an option. That's what we do at Highlands. Our lines are blue and tennis is white.
Yes, Robert?
I think a discussion the board should have is, as we approach resurfacing the court at Bob Newton Park, do we want to continue to have tennis there, or would you possibly just go pickleball?
How many people use that for tennis, Robert?
It's, like you said, I haven't seen a lot.
Well, I
I'm
mean,
not there on the weekends, but I
would
haven't
hate-
seen a
I
lot.
would hate to get a backlash from the 4
Understand.
people that use it all the
I
time.
understand.
well,
But they're easily converted to pickleball, by the way. Most tennis players, once they play it, like him, it's like, wow, this is so much more fun.
Haven't
You know.
picked up my tennis racket in a while.
Well, the court at Bob Newton is fairly large. Yes, Mr. Lawler?
the irony of this, so Bob Newton is one of the parks I was going to report on tonight. I went down there and I was talking to some folks and I said, do you guys use the tennis ball? And they said, no, you know, not as much as we'd like to, and probably for the same reasons, because of repair and stuff. And the one gal, she goes, hey, what about that? She didn't call it pickleball, but I kind of understood what she was talking about. And I said, well, no, we've actually talked about doing that as a multi-use option. And she's lives in that area within, I don't know, half a block or so. And yeah, that'd be fantastic, you know. So just serendipitous, I guess, that that was one of the conversations I had recently. So kind of encouraging, really. But
I think within 6 months, they'd love it.
Yes, Donna?
Um,
Turn on your mic, Donna.
Sorry, it's on. I agree with what Matt said, that I think that at this point, and what Jim said, at this point, we should go for multi-use and see what the demand is. So Bob Newton, I think we should go with multi-use when we redevelop that court. In my opinion, that makes more sense since we don't know what our population is going to be doing. I think that'd be a good place to start, since we are going to refurbish that court, that we should do it there first and see what the response is and then go forward, establishing strictly pickleball if that's the requirement.
I've got a tennis buddy that lives over there in that neighborhood. I'll check in with him and ask him, hey, where do you play tennis? And just to see what he says. He's a big tennis, he's got a couple of neighbors that he plays with. And see if it would change if that court was rehabbed. Would you still go down to Fort House and play? And just see what he says, just try to get an idea.
Yes, Matt?
So, Mr. Chair, I have kind of a formal recommendation without actually a motion. What I would, if that's okay.
Yes.
So what I would say is put together a plan between now and the next meeting. Talk to Robert and Debbie and see if we can get on the agenda. And then maybe at the next meeting, we really dive into this topic specifically on what the future of that or another area might be and go from there. Because I think this is a really good introduction to it, but I think in order to give it the time it deserves and create the discussion, you know, spending some time with Robert and kind of fleshing out those specific details would be a really good thing, and then come back with something in July ready to kind of hit the ground running on that particular issue.
When are you planning to resurface
Sometime between now and 2027. I have no idea.
I can answer that after July of this year. So within the next 13 months.
Incidentally, when I looked at those courts you restriped, you could actually get 2 courts on each side of the net on that. You guys put 1 on each side, but there is enough room to put 2.
Okay, yeah.
So you
That's,
could get 4
that's good to know.
courts.
Cost on that is
Yeah.
next to nothing, it's an extra net.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. We really appreciate your time and allow us to come in. Is there any other questions for us?
Nope.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
It's awesome. Finally, a racket game I can play.
Oh, just,
You think,
Maybe not. Yeah.
well,
I'm awesome on the Wii.
you're not gonna be daunted by it.
I don't know, maybe I'll be chair. Anyway,
Robert, question. The mayor and I were talking, how about putting up a sheet out there that says, would you like this to be a pickleball court or is being considered or something, rather than talk to all the neighbors or whatever?
Sure.
And just see what kind of response we get.
Yeah,
Is
I
that,
think
is
it's-
that doable without?
Absolutely, I think it's doable. I think if you go that route, you're gonna get the people that are actually coming down to the court, seeing the sign versus talking to those who may not even use the park. So, yeah, I like it.
Okay. And Eric, of course, would give us free press. No?
To pickle or not to pickle.
Huh? I'm still trying to get my
Just
golf
let
game.
people know that we might have a sign-up sheet.
we'll get you your own wiffle ball. Just so you can play. Really? Yeah. No, not bronze, that's too heavy. I think
Oh,
yeah.
boy.
No respect. Ah, story of my life. Okay, Peggy and Jerry Moore.
We came tonight to turn in our,
You need to come up to the microphone.
we weren't gonna talk.
Well,
Now you are.
now you are. You signed up. You get to talk.
Their name's on the list.
That's what. But they really came to turn in their application for additional funds.
Okay.
Well, come up and tell us what you're planning to do.
Well, we had a greenhouse donated to Rickman Community Garden. Rickman Community Garden has no electricity, so we can't use a fan or lights or anything like that. So we came up with a plan to make it solar. So we feel like with the solar stuff, we can grow our plants earlier, we can do more, we can let our gardeners start stuff earlier and be more self-sufficient. And we feed a lot of people out of our garden. It's really surprising. And people who come by and visit, we always, if we have lettuce or tomatoes or cucumbers, we always offer it to them. So one of my plans was, after we get the solar thing going and learn about it, we could have classes where people could learn about it. We'd bring in the master gardeners and have them teach it. And then later, when it's appropriate, season-wise, we could have a plant giveaway. We could grow plants, flowers and vegetables, whatever. You come up with all kinds of things. And then have a neighborhood giveaway or invite the whole Keizer group, whoever. Eric. Eric's good about putting articles in the paper for us. But just after we grow them, give them away with a little thing about how you grow it. If you're interested in learning how to use a greenhouse, if you're interested in solar, because I think once people see that solar panel there, they'll be more interested in going solar with things.
Have you talked with anybody from Oregon State?
Oregon State? No.
The ag extension?
Oh,
You-
the
Your
master
group is so
gardeners?
good. I would think that they would jump at helping you do something like that.
I have a hard time finding people who know about solar.
So,
When I called that,
It's
The
the
comfort-
sun. Oh, well,
sun, the heat. When I have called different places, what they do is give us a list of people who do solar work. But most people have not done greenhouses unless it's the huge, huge greenhouses. And most of the companies want to do homes. It's a much bigger project. We're looking at such a small project. We did get one bid, and he's never done the solar on a greenhouse before, but he's willing to learn. And then, of course, we have investigated through Home Depot and a few other places that do greenhouses and tried to come up with solar equipment, kits and things like that. And we do have one electrician in the garden. So he said he would be willing to try to hook everything up and make it proper. So it's like everybody's starting from scratch when nobody really has experience with something this small. But I'm determined. We got our fence and we're gonna have solar.
no, your group does such a wonderful job down there, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr.
This
Weiler.
year,
So-
this year with donations, the food share brings in compost every year, but we got donations of hummy and fertilizer and stuff like that. So we had our gardeners make our own planting mix this year. So if you want to see what good planting mix does, come down to the garden and take a look. Everything's just lush.
So the story of the transfer of the greenhouse was hilarious. If you didn't, the pictures are awesome. Claggett Creek Watershed Council came to it. We put it on a trailer, and there were people walking down Claggett trying to figure out why there was a floating house. It was great. So I want to talk to you. I'm going to get you in contact with some folks I know at the Energy Trust of Oregon. They have these very small opportunities that come along for these very specific type projects, and I think. Madam Mayor, there was that gal we talked to at the conference not too long ago. I want to say it was Abby or something along those lines that we ran across. But she does the new projects, and so this might be something right in their wheelhouse where they can bring that specific expertise, especially as it relates to solar, and probably I would say even just do it for you because this is one of those kinds of projects they really, really, really like.
When I have called them, the only thing they have done is give me lists of people who do solar work.
We'll
I
talk.
can't seem to find somebody who actually is interested in coming out and looking at the project from the energy.
We'll
place.
talk.
Oh, all right.
Because they if you just call the general number, they're more of a general information. They're gonna get you out to the retailers, right? But these people are specifically within the industry, and they have very targeted and very specific kind of projects they like to look at. So it's kind of one of those deals that it has a very targeted audience, and I think that because of the food share and the mission and the kind of work that this has done, I think this would be right in their wheelhouse as something they'd really want to get a part of. So we'll make sure to chat,
I'd appreciate
and I'll
that,
see if I
yeah.
can get them in contact with you.
I think when people see solar panels also, they're gonna be interested in that. And of course, everybody wants everybody else to go solar more.
Except for PG, but.
Looking forward to see you next month.
All right. Thank you very much.
And Debbie, have we got her contact email? So if I want to email afterwards. Excellent. Okay,
I have
I'll
some
get in touch with
extras.
you.
If you'd like extras individually, I have some extras, but we weren't planning on talking tonight.
I'll get your contact information from Debbie, and I'll make sure to reach out to you.
Thank you very much.
I think they left.
It's all good projects tonight. This is awesome.
Yep, I'm going to call their name anyway. Fred and Lynn
I think they've left.
Taganoli. Yeah, I think I saw them leave because there's nobody else left.
They said they weren't planning on talking anyway. They were just in the neighborhood.
Oh. Well, be that way. I mean, I took a shower this week and everything.
And it's only Tuesday.
Yeah, it's only Tuesday. Well, I do it on every Sunday. Go to church, right? All right. This is Shannon's territory. I don't know about lawyers, Shannon. I know you're a nice guy, but you're a lawyer. Anyway. Review of parks, rules, and regulations. All right. You broke it?
Shannon got the Bluetooth one.
Okay, Shannon, you want to fill us in here?
Thank you, Chair and members of the Parks Board. For those of you who were here last meeting, we went over the draft park regulations and had a discussion on several different issues. The staff report doesn't really go into any detail, the same detail I went into as before, but as you can note, we now have a very colorful draft because it's got black, red, blue, and a little bit of green. So the green is the things that I added since our last meeting, and I'll just glance at my cheat sheet here. And with the chair's allowance, I'll just like thumb through real quick and find the green parts. And the first one is at the top of page 3, and it was specifically, well, I think Matt's proposal to clarify that volunteer groups that are doing cleanup or maintenance work don't have to get a permit. That was an issue, kind of a tweak that we made there. And then, I don't think we have one for quite a while.
Section 16, I think, is the next. Nope, page 12. Nope, sorry, page 11.
Yeah, the green and the blue, you know, if you're colorblind, it's kind of hard. I'm not colorblind, but I'm having trouble
Actually, the
picking up the
green-
green and blue.
The
At the
green
bottom,
and red would be bad,
yeah,
Shannon.
the bottom of page 11, we added to Keizer Rapids, Keizer Rotary Amphitheater, the Claggett Creek Shelter and the Chalmers Jones gazebo with regard to I mean, it's really what we do now, but to clarify that if it's not otherwise reserved, that it can be used on a first come, first served basis as long as there's not, you know, electrical use or amplified sound, that sort of thing. So that was that add there. And then I don't think there's one until,
Page 13, you added order on line item 13.
what is your green showing up better than my green, Matt? Oh, yeah, just a minor word. I was going to skip that over.
Okay.
Section 11, I just made a little tweak there with regard to vehicles, adding the word order. And I don't think we have one until section 16.
You added vape on 14. Section 14, line item 6, you added vape in there as part of the no smoking zone.
On what one, Matt?
Page 17, section 14, line item 6.
Oh, the vaping?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That was the direction of the board to make that clear too. So we added vape in there.
Shannon,
Yes.
since that hasn't been passed by council yet, that doesn't go into effect, obviously, unless that is, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
This is what they'll end up deciding on with a smoking suggestion. My understanding.
Is your mic on, Dylan?
Sorry.
So the biggest volume of changes was the issue with regard to drones, and I'm going to let Matt kind of jump in with some more detail on that. Well, after a lot of discussion last meeting, we decided to put 2 alternatives, and that's why you see 2 under section 16 on page 19. You have 2 number 2s, sub 2s. One is the short one, which basically says you can have drones anywhere as long as you comply with state and federal law. And the other one is that you can only do so with regard to areas and times that are allowed by the director. And that would, and I believe both are allowed under federal and state law. Matt did find that exception. This language came from him. The question is whether or not you want to have it a little more wide open, which would be the first number 2, if you will. So Matt can jump in there on that part if he wants.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Chair, I'm kind of playing a dual hat role here. I work in my day job for the Department of Aviation, I want to clarify for the record that statements that I made during the last meeting were not a statement of policy, but more of discussion. I'm not authorized to make policy on behalf of the Department of Aviation, but we did have this discussion as it relates to SUAS, or commonly referred to as drones. And after talking with the Public Works Director, talking with Shannon, and talking with a lot of stakeholders, including a Part 107 or FAA licensed UAS pilot that's also a reserve city police officer here in the city of Keizer. Number one, he didn't even know that you're not allowed under the current regulations not to fly, and has been doing so. I've spoken with a lot of other Part 107 pilots, and Part 107 are drone pilots by the FAA, that have been operating in the parks, mostly because they don't know. There is the state preemption in statute that says that local jurisdictions cannot create rule that dictates the use or operation of a drone. So it kind of falls into this really gray area of how local jurisdictions are supposed to deal with this issue.
Matt? In other words, we can't, or what I understood you just said, we can't have a rule that says you cannot fly a drone. You can't be standing in the park flying a drone?
Well, so the statute, and paraphrasing at the risk of paraphrasing a statute, but there are some allowances as it relates to nuisance, noise, and a trespassing issue. There's not really anything by way of rule that goes on to support the statutory language, so it's very nebulous at best. So in that thought process, and I spoke with the city attorney on this, and one of the things that was brought up was kind of establishing drone zones, right? So the idea behind a drone zone would be, here's this artificial boundary at a park where people can go and responsibly operate their drones. And the idea behind that is really not crowded areas, so definitely not over the dog park or the big toy or the gazebos at Claggett Creek or out here at Chalmers at the skate park. I can't ever say the proper name of that park, but it's a speech thing. Chalmers Jones.
Very eloquent person, by the way.
I imagine. So going through, and basically over heavily densely populated areas, or where people are generally going to gather. You know, it falls into this really weird thing where if somebody were to bring a drone out during the concert, technically they'd be in violation of the FAA law, because you're not supposed to be flying over events or over people, right? Most drone operators don't know that. And so they just do it, recognizing they're in violation of it. So the idea behind what I passed out here, and I'm going to read this for the record, is hopefully something that is more permissive and hopefully educational, but also establishes the authority for the enforcement arm of the city police, to come in and say, no, you're violating this, and this is how. So the first section, in addition to these other two options that we have in the language on section 16, section 16, small unarmed aerial systems, SUAS, commonly referred to and used hereforth as drones, may be used in city parks. Operation of drones shall be done in accordance with FAA laws, advisory circulars, or FAA advisory circulars, and Oregon revised statutes, and Part 3 of this section. Part 2, Keizer may establish drone zone areas where usage is encouraged, so long as said usage is done in compliance with Parts 1 and 3 of this section. And then Section 3 is really the arm as it relates to the enforcement piece. Unlawful operation of drones. It is unlawful for any person to operate a drone in the air, on the ground, or in the water in a careless or reckless manner so as to endanger the life or property of another. In any preceding charging operation of a drone in violation of this section, the court, in determining whether the operation was careless or reckless, shall consider the standards for safe operation and aerial prescribed by federal statutes or regulations governing should be drones. In violation of any restriction, temporary or permanent, issued by the Federal Aviation Administration pursuant to 14 Combined Federal Regulations 91 as amended. In violation of any restriction issued by the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, applicable to drones, or in a manner that interferes with law enforcement, firefighting, or any government emergency operations. In violation of ORS 837-370, a person may not operate an unmanned aerial system over the boundaries of privately owned premises in a manner as to intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly harass or annoy the owner or occupant of the privately owned premise. Now, if you'll notice in section E, that is the only other area except for part 1 where I said unmanned aerial system, and that's specifically because it's quoting statute, and I'm not trying to rewrite the law as a recommendation. So, again, the theory behind this really is to try to be more inclusive of operations, to really try to educate people to use drones in an area that's safe. Most people that I've talked to have done it out in the grass spaces, whether it's at Claggett Creek or at Keizer Rapids, some in the natural areas. But even the natural areas is kind of tough because you have to fly within visual line of sight, meaning you actually can see your aircraft in the air. And if you're under the canopy, it's really tough to do so. Just looking at your camera does not indicate visual line of sight. And so that's really it. Again, trying to be more permissive and less restrictive, trying to educate folks, but also really trying to, just lean on the current laws that are in place. And unfortunately, as I mentioned last meeting, the technology is changing at such a pace that the policy can't even begin to keep up. And so I think that having had a lot of conversation internally in my day job, we've looked at this language, we've talked about it. It seems as if it doesn't, it seems fairly safe to go this route and appropriate at this time. Yeah.
Did I hear you right when you said you can't fly a drone over a person?
That's technically correct. Under the FAA guidelines, as a Part 107 operator, I cannot fly over somebody without prior permission from the FAA. So as an operator, I could go and request a waiver from the FAA saying, hey, I'm going to go fly over an event, and I'll fill out my waiver, and they'll send back, say, yeah, you're good to go, right? Most of that is so you're reading through and recognizing the conditions of the waiver to make sure you're doing so safely. Now, that's a responsible user. Most people, as hobbyists, don't know those rules, and they will do so. But again, if they're in violation of Section 3 of this, or Part 3 of this section, then it gives somebody the opportunity to call law enforcement here locally and say, hey, they're not operating this. Actually, excuse me, in Part 2 of this section, they would be effectively in violation of the Parks Regs rule.
If we wanted to designate a drone area, perfect area would be down by the river where all the rocks and everything are down towards Nut Rocks. That's wide open down there. They line of sight, they can see it, everything else, and they're probably not going to fly over people. If you have them up in that area where there's lots of people that walk that walk, it's going to go over somebody, takes one person, now the police are involved, they have better things to do.
But
I know, I'm just,
and one person could drop a cigarette and caught a fire, but just
yeah,
saying.
but I was down there, I have 2 accounts
Right.
that abut the park. And somebody was out there with, I think, an airplane. It wasn't a helicopter drone. And it was really irritating. Very, buzzing. I don't want to go down to Keizer Rapids and listen to that. And you can't, we'd be getting really nitpicky if we said, well, you can fly silent helicopters, but you can't fly airplanes. I just have a problem with it being in the upper section of the park. I think it's irritating. I think they're going to break the law. And I'm not saying that most people aren't responsible.
But again,
you're going to have 20% that aren't.
but
What a hassle.
you're having my same argument about drones I had with you on this other issue, so I'm not going to go there. Again, it all goes back to the city does not control the airspace,
I understand
regardless
that.
of where it's at.
Right.
Right. So by establishing sort of the drone zones, the city is saying, you know what, we're going to recognize this as a legal use, but we really want to kind of keep you around this area because this is a more safe area. The chances of having higher population of folks that could be hurt is probably significantly reduced. Or we just, leave it as it is and say, hey, you're going to fly in accordance with FAA rules, Oregon statutes, and just hope people are going to be responsible enough.
So we could designate the circle,
Well, but again, that doesn't.
inside that circle.
Let me finish. That doesn't preclude them from going anywhere else in the park.
See, I've got issues with that.
Well, great.
You've got the big toy, you've got the dog park,
But at that point, that could be considered flying in a reckless manner and endangering life or property, right?
Anna, it's your turn.
Thank you. So
Microphone.
I understand everything you're saying, and it sounds to me like we're darned if we do and darned if we don't. We did make a decision to stop the smoking in the parks because they felt that that was the easiest thing to do, the best way to do it.
It wasn't easy.
I'm speaking. My suggestion is this. Does the city have the right to forbid people from flying their drones in a park if they're standing in the park? Yes, they do.
No, they
Because
don't.
if they're in the park, they're standing in the park and they're on city property.
So the state.
If they're standing outside the park,
So
That's a
Donna,
different thing.
The state to some degree, yes, it would be under a trespassing.
correct.
But again,
So I think that what I'm thinking is, and I may be totally wrong, but what I'm thinking is we're making this more difficult than it needs to be. I think we can pass a local ordinance that says you will not fly a drone in a park in Keizer. Period, and we don't have to do with all of the other stuff.
Under that premise, that would be sent to the court, and the city would be in litigation for a very long time.
Well, maybe
No,
not.
if you use that language, what it boils down to is it's
We
such a
could do
weird.
that with smoking too. I mean, a smoker could take the city to court too.
Right,
so-
but this is by statute precluded from local jurisdiction, stating this is the state. I'm just saying what the state says. The feds don't generally, the feds haven't said local jurisdictions can't do this.
Right.
The state has said local jurisdictions shall not do this.
Right,
Shall. It's not permissible.
right.
Yes, Shannon.
So there was two alternatives in the draft after talking to Matt, and now he's presented a third. So the one that Donna's talking about is the second number two.
Which is
there,
the trespassing, right?
which is the trespass one. And so, I mean, Matt, when you say that you can't do that, what you mean is the only way you can do that is to make it's defined as a
Correct.
trespass.
Correct.
Is that?
That's correct.
Okay.
As I understand it,
So-
and how we've talked about it. Yes.
Right. So and I think most folks understand that, but it's not my position to recommend policy for you folks. It's just to kind of guide you through the process and do some wordsmithing. So just to kind of reiterate, you have the two in green, and then you have the one that Matt handed out. The first number two, basically says you can operate drones wherever you want as long as you don't violate federal or state law. The second one in the draft says you can't stand in a park. You can stand on Chemawa or you can stand on 15th and fly a drone over the park, but you can't stand in the park unless it's in a designated area with designated times. And then the third one is sort of a bit in between with the the one that Matt just handed out was an encouragement, but not a requirement that you operate drones in a drone zone. So just wanted to reiterate those options. That's the policy question for you folks tonight.
Yes, Dylan.
So I just want to put on the table that before we try to somehow get wrapped back into whether we can or can't do this, is whether we should or shouldn't. And we definitely, in my opinion, shouldn't be telling people they can't fly a drone just because it's new and scary and we don't understand it and we're afraid of people who don't pay attention to the rules. If we did that for everything that people thought was new and scary and could hurt somebody, we wouldn't allow biking or skating or tons of other things in our parks. Dogs might not be allowed in our parks because dogs can be dangerous and scary, and I don't think that's okay. I think that with responsible recommendations of rule following, that people should be allowed to do this new hobby. That's just where I stand. So I think Matt's rules are great. I think also telling people that as long as they follow the FAA rules would be fine, but this is a little bit more structured and I like that.
Yes, Matt?
So I have a question for Robert. You got 2 new guys, and possibly the conversation of enforcing 2 new activities. One is a ban of an activity, the other one is a potential ban or also the permissive use of an activity. How does that affect your staffing, your time, and what does it take away in order of other priorities from your work right now?
Yeah, I would think, depending on if people are obeying the rules or not, it will take away from us getting our regular activities done throughout the day, you know? If we're down at Keizer Rapids Park and we're picking up litter and all of a sudden somebody comes up to me and says, hey, they're smoking, that bothers me and it's a new law, you're not supposed to smoke. Now our guys have to stop what they're doing, go over, talk to that person, and depending on how that person reacts to us, it can be either, you know, I'm sorry, I'll put it out, or we get the, who are you to tell me what to do, get out of my face response, which we have a lot with dogs off leashes.
So, and at that point, your only option is to call
Call the
PD,
police.
and generally they're not going to respond.
Generally, they probably won't respond in a very timely manner because they're probably on a more important phone call at that point. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the mayor and I just witnessed this on Saturday. We were down there for a cleanup, and a gal walked by with her dog, and she literally looked at me and says, I don't want to hear any of your crap about dogs on a leash. And I said, well, thank you for your opinion, and I'm sorry that you decided to make a flippant comment towards me. And, yeah, it was really uncomfortable. So, well, thank you, Robert. I mean, I don't personally want to see the fee go towards this, but that's just my own personal opinion. But, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Jim?
I'm middle of the road on this. I understand it's a real problem for staff. So I'd like to see us designate an area, and I think that circle where the path goes around, that everyone would know that's a designated area and no other place in any of the parks.
Can't do that.
Well, sure you can, because you can say if
Jim.
you do that, then you're trespassing. I thought you could.
Who's going to do that?
Well,
I don't think it's enforceable. You're trying to, it's like trying to have a smoking section. It's not enforceable, and all it does is confuse people, because they say, oh, look, we can fly our drones here. And just because you say, oh, only in this circle, doesn't mean that that's necessarily what everybody's gonna understand or believe. You either do it or you don't.
And a specific issue of that right now is an area just east of the Cascades did that, and they're being challenged on that very issue right now.
Well, again, this is a big moving target, and it may be something, you know, there may be new statutes, even federal,
Oh, it's happening
in a
like-
month.
Yeah,
And so,
but again, I want to bring it back to a very, very key piece that I suggested. On part 3, the careless and reckless manner and all those other pieces, right? Give a certain subjectivity to the enforcement people to say, look, you're being an idiot, you're flying over the big toy, or you're flying over the dog park, or you're flying over somebody, or you're flying over the concerts, or you're doing something. It gives them the teeth and the authority to then come back and say no, right? They don't have to know all, I mean, this is sort of winnowing down all of the FAA stuff into some very key comprehensible things for the people that are doing the enforcement. And that's,
those 3 areas, they cannot fly over. Is that correct?
well, No, because they'd be in violation of the FAA, they'd be in
Right, that's what I mean.
violation. But again, that's the FAA law. The state has you understand what a preemption is, right? Says you cannot do this. The state
Federal
cannot create.
preempts state, state preempts city,
Right, but the
except when it comes to
make it more
our
explicit,
state that
not less.
says anything goes.
no, our
so-
state says you shall not create laws at the local level regarding the usage or operation of drones.
That is less explicit, not more explicit. More
No,
explicit
you
by
shall
statute.
not create any laws that discuss usage or operations of drones to any level.
So, well, I guess my concern is the dog park, the
Again, that's reckless.
concert, and so FAA says you can't do that.
Correct.
So if somebody flies a drone over the,
Without a waiver, yes.
well, over the big toy, then somebody could say that's against FAA
Well,
I'm trying to find out where
No,
the parameters are.
you're right, but let's say, for example, we're going on a 5th-year anniversary of the Big Toy Project, and we've hired somebody to come in and fly around the Big Toy while kids are out there playing. They could get a permit, and it would be a then
Absolutely.
permitted use at that point, right? So it's, again, you're talking about the feds. It's very, I mean, it's roll the dice and figure out what the next set of rules is going to be like sometimes. And that's, again, the point of this third part is careless, reckless, endanger the life, property, or of another. It's very subjective, and I think it gives opportunity for people to say, look, you know, this guy's dive bombing my dog, whether or not they're a Part 107 operator or a hobbyist. That's probably not the best way to do things. And at that point, they have the ability to call the city and say, hey, look, this guy's doing this or gal's doing this. And they have the ability to kind of look at this and say, nope, you're wrong.
Well, can the city, can a police officer or Robert go down there and cite somebody FAA rules?
Not FAA rules, but they could go here because they don't have the, well, I don't know if that's accurate. I don't think we can fine on the FAA rules. I think we can only fine on our local statutes or our local ordinances and state law. But I don't know that to be gospel or not.
And there's no way that we can be specific and say you cannot fly over the big toy, the dog park, or whatever.
There's a lot, I'm sorry.
Yes, Donna.
I just. Microphone. Turn off your
That's a
phone.
buck.
I just have to say that we've been talking about this for 25 minutes now. We haven't gotten anywhere. I think that trying to enforce something like this above and beyond what already is in force is beyond the limits of the city to do. Unless we just say no drones in the parks, period. If we can't say that, then the federal regulations pertain, and if somebody has a complaint, then they'll go back to those statutes or to state statutes on those complaints, and it takes the city out of the picture. So, do we want the city to be involved in that picture? Or do we want somebody who's in the park seeing a drone being flown incorrectly according to the rules and regulations that are in place now, reporting that to whatever governmental body it should be reported to? Do we want the city to be that governmental body, or do we want it to be the state or the federal government? Are we taking on more than we want to chew, is my point. I think that we're making a mountain out of a molehill. I think we could make suggestions about it according to what the rules are, but I don't think the city is in a place to enforce because we don't have the rules and regulations to do it with. Federal government does, the state does, the FAA does. Those are the people that would need to be contacted if somebody was breaking the rules or laws or statutes or whatever. I think the city should back off and let it happen and see if it gets to be a nuisance. If it does, then we go forward saying this was found to be a nuisance. At this point, I think we just did either say no drones in the park, which you say we can't do, or drones are fine, and let it go at that.
I'm with Donna.
So if I understand the thought process then, you are asserting that this goes away,
Yep.
and then we focus on the two options presented by Shannon. One being any unmanned aerial vehicle, drones, however powered, shall be operated in compliance with FAA regulations and Oregon revised statutes, or we go.
Which is this?
It's,
No.
no, it's
This part.
point one.
That's,
Actually, Jim, I think Matt's referring to the first number 2 in my draft on that page. The draft that he handed out has more specificity and has the more encouraging language. So it's the middle of the road one. So again, members of the board, my draft, and this was language from Matt, the first option, the short one sentence means you can operate wherever as long as you abide by state and federal rules. The second option, mine, is you can't operate at all unless it's in a designated area by the director. And then Matt's option is kind of in between those two with just encouraging a certain area rather than an absolute restriction. So those are the options again.
Shannon,
And I think Donna was referring, just so we can get back to Donna's position, was on that first one. Is that correct, Donna? Okay.
So if I understand this correctly, then, if Robert is down there and sees somebody flying a drone over the big toy and there's 50 kids there, he can go and say, this FAA regulations say you can't do that?
Correct. You can
Isn't
say that.
Well,
well, so my
again, it's subjective, but
No,
it's
I
fairly
mean,
specific that
right.
FHA or FAA says you really can't do that.
Right. And I think, here's the reality. Robert or one of the staff is going to tell a person, and I don't know, Matt just runs into really hard-nosed people. But hopefully, most people, maybe I'm wrong about this, maybe I'm really naive, are going to say, oh, okay, I didn't know that. And they'll change course and they'll do it the right way. If they don't, I think that you could cite them. You wouldn't be citing them directly under federal law. You'd be saying you're violating our park regulations because you're doing something that's in violation of the FAA rules, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that'd be the way I would hope it could work.
And
But
then
which-
they would be told they have to leave the park, or,
Well, they're probably just going to end up with a citation, but yeah, maybe, depending on how dangerous it was, what they were doing.
well, I think anybody flying a drone over 50 kids at the big toy is dangerous.
Yeah, I do too.
So, I mean, there's some obvious ones, and that's probably the most obvious, other than somebody flying it over 800 people at the amphitheater.
Yes, Bill.
And that was my concern.
that's the other guy.
Matt.
That's the other bald guy.
Yeah, it was the hair that threw me off. I don't know by the beard, right?
So, maybe there's a fourth option.
Oh, no.
No. Hold on. Bear with me here a second, okay? And I think it's one, again, that might be helpful. So what I'm going to suggest as the fourth option would be part 1 here
On which part 1?
of the handout.
All right.
Okay. Eliminate the section, or eliminate after where it says statutes. Eliminate the entirety of part 3. And then change in part 2 in compliance with part 1 of this section. So the fourth option I'm suggesting might be UAS, commonly referred to and used hereforth as drones, may be used in city parks. Operation of drones shall be in accordance with FAA laws, advisory circulars. Let me explain the advisory circulars. So the advisory circulars are de facto policy. It's, oh, hey, guess what? And they issue them, and this is how you're supposed to do business from here point on, right?
It has to have the force of law, though? Or is it just guidelines?
Well, so what I believe that they generally enforce the CFRs.
Oh, they're actually CFRs, these advisory circulars?
They come and they address specific CFRs and provide additional
Okay, well, we can
thought
figure out that
processes on
detail
it.
later.
Yeah, and maybe just FAA regulations might
Yeah,
be.
that would be a
might
better phrase.
Yeah, so in accordance with FAA regulations and Oregon revised statutes, Keizer Parks may establish drone zone areas where usage is encouraged so long as said usage is in compliance with Part 1 of this section. And so I think what that does is it says, here, you're going to use your drones, you're going to do it according to FAA regs, but the city may also establish areas where, hey, you know what, go out and fly your drone and have fun.
Are you making that a motion?
Yes.
Okay. Yay.
Second.
All right, we've had a motion. I'm not quite sure what the actual language is in that.
Well, so do we have to motion
That's in
separately for the rest of this?
Oh, wait a
I
minute.
would suggest you go ahead with a motion that's on the floor, and Mr. Chair, I think the motion is, except with the issue about advisory circulars, is that we
Regulations,
include number 1 from Matt's handout. On number 2, delete the rest of the phrase after Part 1,
Right.
and delete all of number 3.
Correct.
All right,
Part 1 of this section, right, yeah. So, and 3.
motion to do what Shannon said, and then Jim seconded it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Any discussion? Apparently not, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
Question
Hot dog. No, what? Why?
Question for who?
Why?
for staff.
What?
Okay.
Would it behoove us or make it easier for you to post some sort of sign with those regulations on it?
The signage issue generally for the park regulations is kind of an issue because you can't put all the regulations on
No.
a sign. And I ran into trouble a few years back trying to shorthand some. So that's sort of a separate issue and is really an administrative issue for Bill and Robert.
Well, if you just
unless
put in that
you have
drone-
specific recommendations.
Drone usage subject to.
Right. I mean, I
FAA
think
regulations.
obviously, and I think would make sense to do, the idea of having a drone zone as an encouraging one is, if the council accepts that idea, it doesn't work very well if you don't have a sign. So I would assume that you would have a sign at least where it's encouraged and possibly where it's not encouraged, saying
Yeah.
the encouraged area is over here, right? Something like that, yeah.
Yes, Matt?
So, Mr. Chair, in addition to this, I've spoken with Jason Lewis, who's a Part 107 operator, a good friend of mine, and we actually brought up the idea is if this moves forward, to do some informational videos specifically on this issue to put on the city website just for reference, so people that are coming in and may not know it can go and look at it and say, hey, these are kind of the right ways to do it. There's a lot of really good information out there on YouTube Land and all these other places where you can do it. But I think if the city takes an educational approach and says, hey, you know what, this is a really cool thing, we're going to embrace this, but here's kind of a best practices.
Be responsible.
Right, and so Jason's very interested in having that conversation, and I've talked to a couple other Part 107 operators, and they're also interested, so, cool.
All right.
But presently, it is not a permitted use, correct?
Pardon?
Under the current regs?
Currently, it's not permitted use. So if I may, Mr. Chair, I'll go through the rest real quickly.
Yes.
Okay, so I made a minor change on page 20 with regard to permits for concealed handguns. I just changed that to state law, so I don't have to worry about the number changing, is all that is. If someone's following the green. And I think that was it,
So I have a question.
except until we get to the fines. Matt?
So under section 20 on the state law piece,
State. On a concealed gun?
right,
Yeah, mhm.
that doesn't take, does that take into consideration policies or executive orders put forth? Because the statute is very specific to concealed carry.
Well, and that's another reason I put state law, because there might be other state laws that for those of you not familiar with this issue, this is a concealed handgun permit, and we are preempted, speaking of preemption, with regard to prohibiting that. So if somebody has a valid concealed carry permit, we cannot prevent them from bringing a handgun onto the park. So that's what it said. That the general rule, again, no person may bring a gun, but it says except by permit issued by ORS .291. I just changed that to state law because sometimes they change the number.
Okay.
And also, there may be another one that I'm not aware of that we are preempted, so.
And anybody who had it, conceal and carry would know that.
Right.
Well,
Should.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to go.
So, on to the fines, and I really have to apologize. I got some information from Marion County and Salem last week and totally spaced on making copies. So you're going to have to just listen to me because I didn't make copies on it. And I apologize for that. Let me grab them here.
Marion County and Salem.
With regard to fine amounts, because that's the direction you guys wanted me to check last time. With regard to Marion County, it's real straightforward on their park regulations. It's a Class A violation under the state statute similar to ours. Under the state statute, the maximum fine for Class A violation is $2,000. The presumptive fine is $440. The minimum fine is $225. Okay, and that's, so they don't make any distinctions between types of violations like we did.
The classes.
It's basically, if you get a ticket and you want to just pay it, it'd be $440. If you want to fight it, the judge couldn't reduce it to less than $225. And theoretically, if you were a really bad boy, you could get $2,000. So that's Marion County. Salem, interestingly enough, is just in the version of changing theirs, and their current one is complicated. So I'm going to tell you what they're planning on changing it to, which they are like this close. It's going to go to their council soon. Actually, I will tell you what it is currently, and they are making it a little more gradated. I was wrong. It's not complicated now. There are divided into misdemeanors and infractions. The ones they define as infractions is 250 maximum and 500 for misdemeanors. But they sent me a second email saying attached is the draft, and it's kind of straightforward. The if I can find it, because it's in the second page. They are looking at 3 based on repeat offenders. So Salem's looking to change their park regulations. Pretty small fine, it seemed to me. The penalty for the first infraction is $50. Penalty for second is $150. The penalty for a third is $250.
Does that in addition?
And they don't say within so many years, or within a year. I don't know how that would work.
In addition to the fine already established under the.
No, that what they're saying is
It's a city
any park violations are started with 50, go to 150, and then go to 250 if you do it 3 times. So relatively small amount, it would seem to me, but. And I'm not certain that's for, I think that's for, this is confusing the way they wrote this. I think that's for real serious ones, I think are more. These are for, well, specifically smoking, it says, and some other
We don't want to do that.
deposit of junk, parking, and a few others like that. I think the real serious ones don't fall into that category.
But
So-
Marion County covers all that.
Yeah, Marion County is just, is everything. It's
Now, would these go to Carl Municipal Court?
correct.
And he has a leeway, 2,000?
He only has a leeway that council gives him in the ordinance. So for example, if we did like Marion County, since Marion County seems a little high to me, Salem seems a little low personally. But if you were in Marion County, and if we adopted Marion County one, our judge couldn't reduce the fine to less than $225 as a minimum fine. So I had a list that was a little complicated, and it was just a starting place. I told Bill and Robert, just, I don't care. I mean, it's up to you folks. It's a policy question for you and council on what kind of levels you want. Do you want to make a distinction between seemingly more serious ones, or do you want to make it more simple and only have 1 or 2? Up to you.
One thing I'd like to take into consideration is how much repair,
Microphone.
how much repair, like an infraction would cost the city
Right.
$5,000 to fix or $50 to fix. I think
Right.
that should measure in somehow,
Right.
depending on how serious it is. So that's an important thing for me.
Right.
Matt?
So I think generally in most cases, and Robert, Shannon, Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong, and actually Madam Mayor as well, I think Chief is more interested in educating people versus throwing fines at them right off the bat. I think if the fines are commensurate with the offense on a repeat offense type basis, I don't know, maybe that's worth scaling, or we just do a standard fine across the board. I don't really know what the right way to do that would be, but I know that Chief is generally more educational, like, hey, this is, you're doing this wrong, let's fix it, let's move on. But if you obviously have a bad apple that's reoffending, then that is where it comes into play, I think. So I'm not sold one way or another on it.
Madam Mayor?
The chief has mentioned this a few times in regards to other issues when it comes to fines. They're reserved for people who just really don't want to get it. There's an opportunity for our officers to educate and inform. That is their preference, because then you have more long-term compliance, which is the ultimate goal. Also, our officers look at the impact of monetary fines on the individuals and their families. Just fining somebody for the sake of fining somebody is not something that they're, that's not a priority for our officers. They're looking at compliance and what's it going to take to help people understand what it is, how to comply with being a good neighbor or taking care of a situation. So overly onerous fines at the get-go will probably end up with a warning. So that will not enter into the mix. However, if there's somebody who absolutely insists that there is no other way that they are going to come into compliance, our officers are more than willing to help them with that on a monetary basis. Does that help?
Mr. Taylor?
Well, and thank you, Madam Mayor. I totally agree with her that the way our police force works is outstanding, and they're not out to bust people, but if somebody really deserves it, they're going to get it. And for that reason, I'd like to make a motion to adopt Marion counties, and then only the serious offenders that the police see that would be a serious offender would go in front of our judge.
Marion Counties is pretty expensive.
Yes, Matt?
Well, but most people aren't going to get a ticket. That's what we just talked about.
In considering that motion, can we hear those values again, please,
Sure.
Shannon?
Marion County just has all of them lumped together from the email from Assistant County Counsel. A Class A violation under State ORS 153, and so they just refer to 153, which is the violation section of the statutes. A maximum of $2,000, presumptive fine of $440, and a minimum fine of $225.
Now, those are high, but keep in mind, that's also one of the reasons that a police officer, I'm assuming, would be reluctant to cite somebody unless they absolutely deserved it or deserved it after talking to the police officer.
No. Matt?
I'll hold in case we get a second.
Well, I'm a little uncomfortable with the level of Marion County's fines. I'm not sure I'm willing to go that high for what we would consider a minor violation. Even the $250 seems kind of stiff for some things.
I think it's too high also.
You're a woman of few words.
Yep.
But they matter. So, Mr. Chair, I guess the one thing I'd offer on this particular topic, and maybe it might help for the second, actually, is personally, I think I'd be more inclined making a recommendation that is commensurate with other fines that the city issues. I know that they just went through this topic with other issues. I don't necessarily see the need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, if we have definitions for the various misdemeanor and various classes, I'd say let's try to keep them as sort of across the board as possible.
Point
Could
of
we-
information, Shannon, is that what your list is based on, is what the city just came out?
I would like to say that, Mr. Chair, but mine was pretty random. I took, if you switch back to the draft, starting on page 26, because I just wanted to finally get this before the board, you know. It was all over the place. What I would suggest is, what I suggested, I mean, it's totally up to you, is if we redid it along the lines of what my suggested numbers would be, we wouldn't list them all, we just group them. So I have ones, I think the lowest one is 100 and the highest one is 500.
Right.
And there's 2 or 3 in between. You can pick those numbers or not. Like, for example, just randomly looking, the first one is Carlson Skate Park, the specific regulations for Carlson Skate Park. We put, and again, these are the maximums. The judge would have the ability to reduce it by up to 50%. So it's $100, then you flip the page a couple more pages. A serious one about damaging property, $500. Different one, vehicle operations, $200. There's another $500 one somewhere. Fires, something to do with fires, illegal fires is 500. Some are 150, 200. Playing golf is a no-no, that's 150. Any of these were, again, random, based on just a judgment call on my part on what I would think most people would think are serious or not so serious.
So this,
Totally up to you.
So follow, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
So this is not necessarily the Class Cs and Ds and all that don't
No.
necessarily follow a specific.
No, those don't, and yeah, I didn't want to try to have too much color in there. So you would, if you wanted these amounts or different amounts, I would just group them and say this is, you know, for these violations are 100, these violations are 200, whatever. However you'd want to do it.
So the one thought I would have, the 1 to 500 as a personal deal is very acceptable, with the caveat that if it is a issue of property or something of significant value, that be taken into consideration. But I would assume that goes into something else. So
I have a
Yes,
question.
Jim.
I have a question about that, and I'll withdraw my motion. If somebody purposely damages property, they're caught breaking up a play toy or something, is there any way that we can recover those costs?
I am not certain about that. There is a state statute with regard to the liability of parents and minors. And interestingly enough, the insurance companies don't like you to know this, but your regular homeowner's insurance covers that. So if your kid breaks something, you can, there's a maximum. But if you have an adult who does it, I don't know if a municipal court in this kind of setting, it's not criminal, has the authority to issue what's called a restitution judgment.
Could
Now,
they be referred to district court?
Yeah, so I think as a practical matter, if you had a situation where somebody intentionally damaged, defaced, you know, vandalism to a substantial degree, they're not going to be charged here. They're going to be charged under a criminal statute.
Oh, okay.
And then under the criminal statute at circuit court, that judge would make the restitution part of that judgment, and that's how it'd work.
So we don't have to address that?
No, I don't believe so.
Well, I can't remember all your numbers. Well, there's 500.
In here,
Right,
it's basically 100 to 500, Jim.
right. Then let me make my motion to accept the numbers 500 to 100 as Shannon has. I don't have it in front of me. Is that okay, Debbie?
We have a motion to accept the fines
So
as,
as is.
what? Do we
Sorry.
have a second?
Um,
That wasn't a second, that was,
That was a num.
I'm looking at Dylan. Dylan's thinking.
No, I'm really not. That's the problem.
He's gone. He left.
you
I'll
left-
second the motion,
you
Mr.
left the
Chair.
building?
I think Matt seconded it.
Did Matt second it? All right, so we have a motion to accept the fines as basically stated in Shannon's draft. Is there any discussion? Yes, Donna.
I just want to make sure that, thanks, Dylan. I just want to make sure that, again, as we requested, that we have consistency. So when you say you're going to make choices about what will be and what will not be $100 and what will be $500, will those be choices that will,
Well, they're right in there now. You can look through them right
are
now.
just as they are now, so no change?
Well, that's
That's
what the
the
motion is. So you folks want to skim those over.
Well, the original request last meeting was to make sure that there was consistency, so at this point, yeah, I don't see consistency.
Aren't these consistent with what has been adopted already by council with other things?
Oh, with other code violations?
Right.
Other code violations are typically
Right.
a maximum of $500, and the minimum is usually 50 or 100.
So we're in those parameters. Okay.
Yes, Matt?
Donna, when you talk about consistency, are you talking with other jurisdictions or just across the board?
I just want to make,
Talking about our jurisdiction.
I was asking Donna, but okay.
That was Donna's question, not yours, Jim.
thank you. Just want to make sure
Right.
that, again, looking at,
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Well, we
right.
can, Debbie pointed out the minutes, and I didn't take that as a suggestion that I was supposed to change something. I thought that was a suggestion between yourselves, so I didn't make any changes.
noticed.
Yeah, no, I guess I didn't understand it that way.
Right.
It said, asked me to check on the fines for Marion County and Salem, and then it says they also suggested Class B, C, and D violation fines be consistent. And I didn't take that to mean, Shannon, go make those changes. The B, C, and D violations, and I can certainly do that if you prefer that. I mean, that doesn't require you looking at it again. The idea that all the B violations would be the same amount and C, oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, that
I
was
think
my
that's-
point.
I think
Yeah,
that's kind of what
and
we're
if you want to,
suggesting,
if you want to change your motion to that, then that's fine too. I apologize if I got that wrong.
Yeah, let's do it that way, the way you have it.
So, is that do you want to withdraw the previous motion?
Yeah, I'll withdraw it and
Okay.
make that
So-
motion instead.
So the motion is to make all the B, C, D violations the same?
This-
In other words, so what would that be?
No,
All the Bs would be the same, all the Cs would be
Right,
the same,
right,
but what I
right.
mean is that what amount would each of those be? Because
Well-
that wasn't discussed. Are you
Well,
talking
there's
150,
there's a lot of
250?
variation. So Jim, maybe withdraw, and then
Come back again.
because I don't know.
well, okay, I'll withdraw the motion, but I have
And
a
the
question.
second agrees to
He has
withdraw?
to withdraw first.
Yeah, no, I would.
Yeah, okay.
So I think what Shannon's suggesting is maybe we say all the misdemeanor Bs are 500, all the misdemeanor Cs are 225 or 250, and all the Ds are 100.
Is that,
No, that's what I mean is your direction was to make all the Bs the same, the Cs the same, the Ds the same. The question is, what is that amount for each of those three?
Right.
And do you want to, I mean, Matt was suggesting offhandedly 5,
Correct.
250, 1, whatever.
isn't that what you had?
No, because
No,
they
mine,
scale all over.
mine were more precise.
I
Based-
can't imagine,
based-
Shannon.
Based on an advanced level of knowing which one's more serious or not, in my own mind.
Well, but those would be categorized
Yes.
into B,
Yes.
C, and D.
Right.
And I'm comfortable with that.
Right.
And the 500, 250, 100.
In
And then
addition-
also the judge has, I'm still talking. The
Well, we
judge,
don't know
the
when to
judge
stop.
has the option to cut those in half also, right, Shannon?
Correct.
Okay, that would be my motion.
And
Donna?
just to confirm, Class B 500, Class C 250, Class D 100.
I have an additional suggestion that I brought up earlier in this meeting, that we look at the cost to the city as another parameter about what is what. So I don't know if your C, A, and B are set up that way, or whether they're statute related, or,
And Donna, you mean cost of the city in what way?
well, if somebody wrecked the big toy,
Oh, yeah, that'd be going back to what Jim was saying.
Right, okay,
That would be
but
in criminal
what
court.
about a picnic table that got burned up?
Mm-hmm.
So, is that all criminal stuff then?
I'm sorry, what?
Is that all criminal violation then?
Right, I don't know that the municipal court judge has authority for a restitution judgment above and beyond the amount of the fine.
I'm not asking for restitution, I'm saying what it would cost the city to replace that picnic table.
That would be,
Would that be part of the ABC
To a threshold, is that kind of what you're
yeah.
thinking?
qualification of damage?
Oh, I see. Well, I guess that would depend on which one of these falls in terms of damage. So,
Fire is under $500 right now.
Right.
Class C violation.
Which makes.
but
very
that's a
good sense.
Class C note,
That's a Class C.
so it'd only be $250 under the current
Correct.
motion. Was there a second
How
to
do we,
the
how do we
motion?
decide the classes? That's, I guess, the question.
Well, that was decided before me. That's what's in this draft, and that's why I didn't go by that, because it seemed to me, for example, Kat's right, the fires is only a Class C violation.
Yeah, it should be D or
What-
B.
B, well, should it? I
Well,
mean, that's, yeah.
That's pretty serious. That's arson.
So I guess that's my question. Are these classifications still viable? Do they make sense?
Oh, I see your point.
Yeah, I
no,
wanna-
I
wanna
can't,
look at
I can't
both
say
sides
that
of
that's
it.
true. I recognized a couple of these that I thought were class, and that was one of them, now that you point that out, Kat. Is like, wow, fires is only Class C,
But
you know?
it's listed at 500, which is good. because
Well,
it
I
can
listed
burn
at
down.
500,
Right.
but under the current motion, it'd only be 250.
Right.
Which I don't think is correct.
Correct. And so that's what I'm saying. We should look at this holistically, not just go with the ABC as it stands now.
Right.
We should look at each individual. Is this really an A? Is this really a B? Is this really a C for these fined amounts?
Well, and the other,
Can we leave that up to Shannon? I mean,
Yes.
Okay.
I
Well,
wanted to
that's
look at
pretty-
this.
Yeah. and-
Shannon,
No, I
That-
wanted
that's
to
a
look
big
at
policy.
You,
That's
you,
huge.
point
folks,
of
you-
information, Shannon.
Pardon?
Where did you get this ABC? Is that
This was
state law?
already in there.
it's already in there.
It's
This is
old-
in their
it's
current
old business.
regs. I didn't, that, whoever drafted this before me had it like that,
Also, it's not.
way long ago.
Not defined by state law then.
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, thank you. Matt?
So, the A, B, and C is not designated by state law, is what you're saying, correct? Those are different
What,
sections.
when this was drafted before, and I don't think I was involved back then, it was a long time ago, maybe I was, they wanted to just, instead of setting fine amounts in here, they just said, hey, we think this violation is like a Class B, Class C. So they said, your fine violation is considered a Class D violation. So the city can say, under state law, this is a Class D for purposes of fines. So they didn't get into the particulars in here and what the dollar amounts meant, which meant they could go up automatically, which was the advantage, I guess.
What
Jim,
is
let me-
easier and what is your suggestion? Can you
This
answer
is
that?
a policy question. I made my suggestion for talking points just a starting place by listing them in here, in the red. So if you, I mean, again, that's a policy question. Those were my suggestions, just for a place to start.
Are there any others that stand out to you other than the fire one that are misplaced?
I kind of, it's up to you. I see Class B violation, intoxicating beverages. Class B under the motion would be 500. I threw in 200. I mean,
So, Mr. Chair, I believe we're sitting here on the Parks Board, and we're generally supposed to have awareness of what this means. I think that a lay person is going to really struggle with this. And a key piece that I believe that we're missing is the definitions as it relates to the Class B, C, and D violations. And so my recommendation would be, whether it's through state statute or rule, to define said violations, and then in accordance with that, maybe look at the fines differently, because we have Class D violations that have ranging fines from $150 all the way up to, whatever it is. So I guess my question, if there's a specific definition of the B, C, and D violations, I think we need to include that, or at least understand that, so we understand how that functions, And then as a result of that, if your suggestions are commensurate with those specific types of violations, then maybe we're okay where we're at. But I don't know, I don't think any of us know what the definition of the BC and D violations at this point are.
Well,
I
if
understand.
they're not, what these are, and I think they're connected with traffic, basically. These are classifications of violations, not crimes, that the state uses. And so when you say a definition of it, there's not a definition of a B, C, or D. It's, when you look at the statute, it says, you know, driving in the bike lane is a Class C violation. So you could look at that list, but it's not a definition. It's a list of different traffic violations or other violations that are not crimes, but only violations or infractions. And the state makes a legislative determination, this is more serious than that. And so it's a D and a B instead of a C, for example. So it's not a definition of, you know, Class B violations are defined like this. It's the individual violations.
I have another suggestion. If these violations are so incredibly difficult to figure out, can we just drop the violation part and say, if you start a fire, it's gonna cost you this, if it do
That
this?
was my suggestion.
Okay.
So again, if you wanted to go with this, regardless of my dollar amounts or different dollar amounts, I would take out all the classes altogether.
Okay.
I just didn't do that because I didn't want all that color in the way. In my first draft, I said we would basically take out the violations and just say, these groups is $100, these groups are $150, whatever. So.
But I would like to see what those groups are before we
Well,
just go forward.
they're right here.
They're here, so I think
But it still be grouped the same way.
No,
we're
not
taking the
necessarily.
class piece out. The violation
Yeah,
classes
class.
go away.
B,
What
C,
would
or
that
D.
do like to the fire?
Well, the fire is, I mean, Jim, it depends on whether you want my numbers or your own. Right now, it says 500 in red. I said
Okay.
fires would be
And I
500.
think that's appropriate.
Smoking is 200. That's a maximum. You know, you don't like that, you can up it. I mean, that's why that was drafted that way, is for consideration. And I think we didn't get that far in the first meeting.
So all of the class violations are in accordance with ORS 153. So if I understand correctly, the thought process would be, if we're going to go look at page 26, the very first violation discussed, it would say violation of section 5, subsection 6, or excuse me, subsection 3 of this ordinance is considered a violation with a $100 fine.
Correct. All the classes would be taken out.
I think that's smart,
Yep,
because right now, I'm just tallying up and it's all over the place.
yeah.
The classes are all over the place, they don't make any sense at all.
So
And I agree, and that's why I threw in those dollar amounts. I didn't think that they jived, frankly.
As long as you take the class out, the dollar amounts, yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the violations be changed with the example of section 26, paragraph, or section, or part 1. Read something to the effect in all of these to violation of section X, subsection X of this ordinance is considered a violation and carries a fine of whichever dollar amount.
Which are the ones in red, which are
Yes.
listed.
The ones in red as presented by the city attorney.
I'll second that.
We have a motion to modify this by taking out the letter,
Classes.
the class letter, and just going with the fine suggested by the city attorney. We have a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
So, Mr. Chair, just to be formal, because that's the kind of guy I am.
I know,
If-
you're attorney.
If there's no other questions, the appropriate motion now would be to move to recommend the regulations as amended to council.
So, Mr. Chair, I will make a motion to, for the recommendation of the parks regulations as amended to the city council.
Second.
We have a motion to accept the regulations as amended, to pass them on to the city council. And it's been seconded. Any discussion? Think hard, Dylan. I'm sure you will.
Well,
Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Shannon.
You're very welcome.
Job.
Park reports.
I think my brain's bleeding. No, I think this is our reports.
Oh,
Our
I'm
reports.
jumping ahead of things.
It'll be fast.
You were
wanna-
asleep,
I don't wanna-
Robert
Robert.
wants to go home.
Robert wants to, I want to go home too.
I heard
We were provided these beautiful pictures of meadows, and it's really, really cool. This is really neat. Yay!
It's a
Yeah,
lot
there we
bigger
go.
than I thought it was gonna be.
Yeah, there we go.
What's a dirt pile
Very
right now?
nice. So, and I stopped by there tonight. Looks really nice. It's coming together really good. I'm really excited about that. And every day I drive by it twice, so I get to see a little bit of progress every single day. So that was really, really cool. I did pass by Clear Lake. It needs to be mowed today. Today I passed by it. It needs to be mowed. Clear Lake does.
in the trees.
Yeah, in the trees and
And
the
out
rest of
front?
the field, it looks like it needs a mow. And I know people are out there playing baseball, so they'd probably appreciate a mow.
Okay. Just for the record, we mow in the trees sometimes, but the school district actually mows that front.
Oh, they
generally,
do?
But
Okay.
We got an MOU or
I'm
something.
just letting you know.
Huh?
MOU or something in place.
I don't know. Just happens.
It was about waist high, wasn't it?
In the trees, yeah, it was pretty tall.
All right,
I
we'll
mean,
get on that.
people were doing, had
Yeah.
their dogs in there and they were having fun.
For sure.
but Anyway,
That's where the truffles are, right?
yeah. All right, that's it.
Donna.
All is well at PFC Ryan. Drove by today, it was all quiet and beautiful, and Northridge continues to be the same. I'm still thinking that we should either disallow people from entering the property, or we should at least put up a sign that says this is a natural preserve, that it's not for picnics, and it's not for games, and it's not for something.
So are we working to clear up the entrance on the north side?
Because I don't think.
We
any
don't
of
have an easement all the way into the park, is that correct, up there?
That is correct.
No.
We're not doing anything right now.
Oh. I see
think
it's
we
high
should.
on your
I think we
priority list.
should.
I know, it's a non-developed park and it's gonna stay that way for a long time.
There should be something that says no entrances, because we are going across people's property in places.
Well, yeah, and there's a slice down the middle of it that we don't own.
So just, that's my suggestion, whether it's something we want to do or we don't want to do. It is a city park. People are going to say, well, what'd you do with all that money I gave you? How come you're not improving this area? Or should we just close it off and say this is a natural habitat?
Actually, if you look at the map, the only way you know it's a park is because it's colored green.
People that live by it know.
Yeah, and they've also built inside the easements to get down to it.
Exactly. So anyway, that's my suggestion as the reviewer of this park.
Mr. Holland is not here.
So, Chalmers Jones has sort of become the de facto watering station for the Mid-Willamette Valley. It's been very busy. I will comment on a personal note, I'm extremely proud of the Public Works staffs for getting that going and providing that opportunity for our neighbors to the south. Really cool. As a result, the usage has been exponentially higher over the last couple weeks, mostly with traffic and people coming through there. I was presented with an express concern about restroom facilities, that the current restroom in place is not ADA accessible. So they asked to have that looked at and addressed. And the splash fountain is opening, I think, the 14th, so that's kind of cool. That's all in part of that area. Still a lot of usage. The kids are super stoked about the changes down at the park, and all good things going on there. Obviously looks beautiful because it's right here next to our beloved City Hall. Bob Newton, as I mentioned earlier, talked to some tennis players. They're intrigued on the pickleball idea. Overall, people just really like that park being kind of a tucked away neighborhood park, and it gets lots of love and lots of people down through there. There's a family picnicking when I went to go visit, and it's a really nice stretch of property there. One of the really nice parks in Keizer. So Nothing out of the ordinary to report that hasn't already been discussed.
I just want to make a comment. As my participation on the Keizer Parks Foundation, I understand that there was some confusion on our website regarding the park, the fountain hours and days.
Oh.
Just to let you know that we have just simply removed that from the foundation's website. So all the information will come to the city now. There are going to be several things like that happening. So you let me know if there's any other discretions.
Okay.
Robert, it's your turn.
All right, well, you guys hit on a couple of things I was going to mention, which is cool, because it means you're paying attention, and I like it. Meadows Park, obviously, you saw the pictures. It's going up faster than I thought it would, which is awesome to see. We've been up there working on some irrigation repair from our end, making sure it's going to be ready to go once the construction's finished. But yeah, they're just going right along, so I encourage you to get up there and take a look at it midway through the project if you have time. It's always fun to see construction sites in action, I think. So, Hidden Creek Neighborhood Association, just had a meeting with them today to discuss possible irrigation along Hidden Creek in the very narrow piece of park that we have there. It's been a topic of discussion for the last couple years with them, and given we have the manpower to do more mowing in that area than we ever did before, I opened that discussion back up, and looks like you might be seeing them at a meeting here in the near future to discuss that and maybe a possible matching grant application from them. So we'll see where that goes. That'll be kind of neat to continue the a little more developed look and give them some green grass in the dry months where it just really dries up over there next to the creek and doesn't look so nice. So, did you have a question?
Just point of, who's the Hidden Creek Neighborhood Association?
Did you mean Gubser?
No,
Or not
I think
neighborhood association,
homeowners
but
association.
homeowners.
Oh,
Sorry,
they-
I
okay.
said the wrong term.
Right, thank you.
Homeowners. Thank you for correcting me, Matt.
I was excited.
No.
I'm like, cool, another.
Yeah, no. Homeowners. Splash Fountain, yes, it's going to be open later this week. We're just kind of waiting on the weather. We were talking about maybe opening it tomorrow. It's supposed to be 69 and possible rainy, so that's not a possibility. Wednesdays through Sunday, noon to 7. On days forecasted to be 75 degrees or over. So
All next week.
yeah, absolutely, all next week. So
Supposed to be 84.
that's all I got.
All done already? Council liaison.
Maybe you guys have noticed, I'm not Councilor Herrera. He sends his regards. He is following doctor's orders for once, and I threatened to wrap him in bubble wrap if he didn't. So I'm pleased to be with you tonight. I appreciate the work on the parks rules. We look forward to receiving them after you have completed all of your work on it. I know it's been very detailed, and that's what we count on is that kind of work being done here, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The big thing is tomorrow night is the joint work session with the Planning Commission and the City Council, and this is open to everyone. This is receiving the report from the consultants on the Transportation Growth Management, one of our 2 grants that we are going through right now on urban growth and where we are in terms of our infrastructure and what our possibilities are going forward. Probably most of you know that the whole idea of 20 years of a developable land within an urban growth boundary, well, Keizer doesn't have 20 seconds. So this has been a very detailed and long-term process with our Keizer Futures, then we did the economic opportunities, we did the housing needs, and now this on the infrastructure, particularly in terms of transportation. Also, speaking of housing, just to bring up to date, we still are very much in a housing crisis. We don't have enough of just about any kind of housing within Keizer. And the homeless initiative is work that has continued to go forward, addressing the needs of people in our community who are either homeless or housing insecure. We have made, as a general community, Keizer being one of the partners in the homeless initiative, we are already seeing results of a number of projects that have gone forward, a lot of collaboration that is happening, and very good data that is being collected, primarily through Community Action Agency, and the assessment they're able to use with each person that they start working with, assessing what their needs are, what their vulnerabilities are, and to appropriately place housing type and services so they can be effectively served and get them into long-term stability. So rather than some of the old models where you just help the people who are easy to place, the real return on investment for the community in terms of social services, health services, and law enforcement is to really address the needs of the chronically homeless. That data has been substantiated nationwide, and that is the approach that some of our agencies are taking, and we are already seeing some very significant advances. That's not to say that we're not taking care of some of the needs of folks who need affordable housing. You're going to see Cornerstone opening this fall over on Portland Road. St. Monica's just opened on Apple Blossom. And if you haven't driven by there, the apartment building they took down and the new one that is now a father-to-have home for mothers and children is absolutely gorgeous. Samanka is doing some great work here, and then we have a number of partnerships. So how does this affect parks? This is a place, our parks are where families can go, even if they don't have a big budget. It's where families can get together and meet other folks in the community. We have our community gardens that help feed so many people with healthy, nutritious food. And our parks are a very important part of what's going to sustain people, no matter what their income is long-term. So those are a couple of the updates. If you have any questions, if I don't know the answer, I probably know who does. Thank you.
Our youth counselor is not here.
Right, I need to take her off now too because school's out.
Thank you.
She's never been here.
No, she hasn't attended any meeting.
Any other business? Matt? Surprise.
So I'm going to move away from Kat. So just real quick, if you haven't noticed, down over at Keizer Rapids, all the sticks are gone. We did that a couple weeks ago, started on Wednesday. Very successful, in my opinion. The piles burned very fast. We were able to consolidate them and keep the piles hot. And then once they got to a certain size, we actually physically moved them to keep them from hopefully impacting neighborhoods as much as possible. But the work is certainly not done. Last week, this week, and probably through the first part of July, we will be conducting stick pickups. So we're down there at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, picking up sticks in order to prep that field as much as possible for the farmer to come in and actually do that. The idea behind it is that anything much bigger in diameter than a thumb or over a foot in length can cause damage to the equipment, and so we're trying to be good stewards of that. This Saturday is actually really exciting. It's Comcast Serve, so they're going to bring a bunch of Comcast employees out, and they're going to be doing the walk down and picking up a bunch of sticks there. So that's pretty awesome. So that's 9 to noon or 1 or whenever that's done, and then the following weekend we'll be doing it as well. And the last piece I wanted to bring out, I did get an email from Miss Joanne Belkey regarding accessibility. She had brought up, sorry Jim, didn't mean to interrupt. She had brought up the idea of the swings in the parks and sort of the accessibility thing, which she didn't recognize is that we do currently have an ADA accessible swing at the Big Toy, and as I understand it, we're going to have the same style swing at the Meadows, and I think moving forward, it's going to be a really good thing for the kids. But I think it's really interesting to take into consideration as we look at additional playgrounds and stuff coming in, there are new technologies out there that actually allow for kids to take their kids or anybody with mobility issues to take their wheelchair into sort of cradle that holds it and actually gives them that full experience and something that they feel supported in and things like that. You know, there are challenges that present themselves with that, because whether it's warranty or compatibility with other pieces of equipment. But I promised Ms. Belke I'd bring that up. She was very pleased to hear that Keizer's already on the forefront of doing that with the 2 current swings that we have, or 1 in place and 1 going into place. And gosh darn it, I just want to say thanks to Robert for kicking butt on the Meadows thing. It's so cool to see that happen. It's such a huge first project to take on with this parks fee, and man, honestly, I simply could not be happier with the amount of work you've done since that thing come into place, getting your staff in place, getting everything going. I mean, it's been monumental. Congratulations, and thank you very much for your hard work. So, that's it.
I have a kudo for whoever put up the sign that says, this is what your fees are taking care of. Kudos to that, whoever that person is, and to the Keizer Times for actually publishing the picture.
Well, they're gone now.
I know.
Any other business?
We do have to decide who wants to report to council.
Oh, because Mr. Holland,
Supposed to, and he's not here. Does anybody want to volunteer?
Interesting how that happens.
I can't.
What's the date? Where is it? June 18th?
Yes, June 18th.
I think Dylan, you took the last one for the team, didn't you?
The last one, yeah.
And I'm unavailable. I can't take the next one. Otherwise, I would.
David, you actually, Dylan must have taken yours last month.
Mhm.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
you
he
weren't here.
did.
Do you want to
Yep.
take it this coming month in June?
sure.
Okay.
What a guy. What a guy. That's why we like you.
18.
Monday. Next
Okay.
Monday.
It won't be a long report. We fought over the rules and the fines. And we should make pickleball courts. All right. Any other business? Stand adjourned at, oh geez, 8:02.